In the early 50s, I don't know if you've ever seen an oil fire, but in the early 50s, there was a guy named Red Adair who became famous for putting out oil fires. Now, these oil fires, I don't know if you've ever seen one, they can get pretty gruesome. Oil fires like these, in fact, one of the ones he's most famous for actually going and taking down was one that shot a 450-foot plume of fire. 450 feet of fire for 5 months. You think about that kind of fire. A fire that is blowing so hot, and in many cases is so big, that it feels virtually impossible to completely conquer, at least by man. And yet, Red Adair became famous for being able to take fires like these and tackle them. Now, the thing is, right, if you're going to go after something like this, you have to put a tremendous amount of fire-retardant foam on the fire. It has to be voluminous. I mean, the amount of foam that has to land on the core, hottest part of that fire has to be massive. And the problem often can be that you don't have hoses big enough, long enough, to get to the center mass of that fire and to drop the amount of foam needed to kill it. So in the 60s, in Saudi Arabia, one of these fires went off, and they called Red Adair. And Red went out there. By now, he had run his own company. He was a specialist. Everybody knew he was the guy. And he told them what they already knew. There's not a hose big enough to get to the core of this fire and put it out. And they're like, yeah, thank you. We knew that. That's why we called you. You're the specialist. What do we do? And so what he did was he assembled an entire team to go completely around the fire, each with small hoses, each attached to a fuel source of the retardant, the fire retardant, the foam. And all at once, synchronized, they all timed the drop of foam from all the way around the outside, all of them shooting at the same time to the middle, and they were able to get enough foam onto the core of the fire to put it out. And when they did it, they were more than happy to pay him $3 million because he knew how to solve that problem. Red Adair is a guy who said, oh, if you think hiring a professional is costly, all right? Wait till you try hiring some amateurs, right? Wait till you discover the cost of hiring people who don't know what they're doing. He was protected because 3 ways around to his facility where he had all the power and control over the government, even though he wasn't in government. All 3 routes around the property were water. There was only one path that you could navigate to. And the problem was that the military had huge tanks. And the military had these huge tanks, but they could only go down the single path that went to the drug dealer's fortress. The dictator was furious. The military was furious because they caught wind that the drug dealer had put landmines all throughout that road. There's no way you can move these tanks out to the dictator's spot. And you go, how in the world are you going to conquer a situation like this? How in the world are you going to solve it? Right? Because you have a mass of resources, tanks and army, and you want to take that mass of resources and you want to apply it to a threat, but you can't get all of them to go where you want it to go because the conditions are unsafe. How do you take this down? Let me show you another one of these cool studies just to have some fun. Anybody seen this before? Not as many. It's not as widely known. They want to know how you can arrange this so that you get alternating glasses of liquid and not liquid. You're looking at it, you're thinking about it. Can I give you a hint? It's not what you think. It's not what you think because you can't think the normal way. The way you want to solve the problem is not going to work because there are constraints on the problem. And because there are constraints, you're going to have to figure out an alternative approach. Did any of you have that answer? Yeah. This is what happens when you have a bunch of engineers in the room. They're like, plus the guy that hangs out at the bar all the time, he's like, I can solve this easy. All right? That's not a problem at all. Let me tell you about one more problem. The problem is of a patient who has a tumor. The problem with said tumor is it's in the middle of his body, behind several organs that are important. And the only way to kill this tumor is to put enough X-ray laser beams to kill it, but anything it penetrates through the body, it will also damage. Such that if you use the requisite power to kill the tumor, you also likely kill the patient. Sucks, doesn't it? I don't know if you've had any family members that have had to get in machines like this. I don't know if you've ever heard of situations where they want to go and get any kind of radiation treatment, but the problem, if you have a tumor that is specifically in a particular place, is that sometimes you can't do the thing you want to do. A good friend of mine has a son who now is 11, and yet since he was 3 or 4, we discovered that he had a problem right behind his eye, a brain tumor right behind the eye, and if they were to treat that brain tumor the way they wanted to treat it, they would make him blind. And so they've had to use all sorts of alternative approaches. Now I know some of you are thinking, maybe when we put someone in a keynote presentation, we should at least constrain them to a topic so that it's somewhat related to WordPress. I get that. Let me ask you a question. How many of you have had a great day so far? Yeah. How many of you have gotten your money's worth? You see? So it doesn't matter what I talk about. Because I don't have to issue a refund at all. You got everything you needed before. This is just a chance for me to talk to you. But you're thinking, seriously, what does this have to do with anything? In 1980, 2 researchers presented the medical problem of a tumor to students. 2 researchers did this across universities, and not the dumb universities, I mean the smart universities with smart students. And they said, hey, here's a problem, there's a tumor. The tumor requires a beam of X-ray radiation, but that beam will kill anything it penetrates through such that it could kill the patient. How do you solve the problem? They had no clue. Don't get ahead of me. So then they said, hold on. If only 10% of the people could solve this problem, what if we give them a hint? Right? What if we tell them with a reminder, hey, remember that first story about Red Adair? It might have something to do with solving this problem. Now, if I give you that hint that says, hey, the Red Adair story may be applicable to this, then you'd be like, no duh. Don't use one hose in the middle that doesn't get enough, foam to the center of the fire. Just encircle it, a lot lower intensity, throw low intensity radiation against this thing from all sides. We're done, right? How many of you would have that idea? Yeah, guess what? Only 30% of those morons figured it out. I have no idea how you get that hint, right? And you're still like, I don't know. Here, check this out. They gave a hint after that. In solving the problem, you may find that one of the stories you've read before may be applicable. And even after they said, hint number 1, remember Red Adair, and hint number 2, the stories you read previously, before you did those other 2 puzzles, they may be applicable to solving this problem. There's still 25% of the people who couldn't figure it out. Okay? I don't know what to do with those 25% of the people, seriously. But thankfully, I don't think you're them. But you go, wait, what's going on? Maybe the problem is that the write-ups weren't good. Maybe the problem was the descriptions weren't good. Maybe the problem was that there weren't diagrams. So in 1987, 2 more researchers did the same problem. This time, they created diagrams. So at the end of the story for Red Adair, they drew a picture. And I'm not joking. It was a picture, a dot in the middle of a circle with a lot of arrows coming from all the sides. And they're like, here's the picture. And they even told people, hey, write a summary. Right? Just write a summary of what you think happened in the Red Adair story. And then they said, hey, how do you think they went after the military guy, right? And they said, oh, well, instead of bringing tanks, they brought a lot of people on feet, and then they encircled the camp. And you're like, write the summary and draw pictures. And they had pictures at the end. They even wrote a principle. If you need a large force to accomplish some purpose but are prevented from applying such a force directly, many small forces applied simultaneously from different directions may work just as well. You would think that it changed something. You would think that people would have figured out, well now I got this. The stats didn't change at all. And you're like, oh, come on now. Seriously, this doesn't make any sense. Right? I mean, it's easy to get in that place where you start judging whoever these ridiculous students were. Even though they're different students in different parts of the country, studying at different universities. And you think, how hard is it? This is not a super complicated problem. Let me ask you a question. How many of you have ever looked something up online, gotten an answer, and then within 6 months had to look it up online again? You didn't have to raise your hands. It turns out, right, when people are challenged to summarize what they learned, when people are told, I want you to take the lesson learned, I want you to abstract it, I want you to write general principles, I want you to summarize it, then you may learn it. Right? If not, they don't apply. And here's the problem. We think concretely. I have a 7-year-old boy. My 7-year-old boy loves crayons. He loves Spider-Man and Hulk and many other things, but he loves crayons. And he drew on the wall. And we said, because we were idiotic parents, you can't use those crayons on the wall. You realize my mistake already? Because then we had markers on the new carpet. Now, I got to tell you, I'm married to literally the best and most amazing woman on the planet. She is incredible. She gets mad, roughly speaking, in the 10 years we've been married, 4 times. She's amazing. Okay? But one of those 4 times was just a few weeks ago. Because we bought a new house, and she picked most of the things in it, including the carpet. And my son decided to play a treasure hunt game. And in order to play the treasure hunt game, he needed the black and red markers. And he went to a spot in the master bedroom near the bed. And he made a huge X on the carpet so his sister could look for treasure. I've never seen my wife with her head detached from her torso. First time ever, right? And I had to calm everybody down, and it's just carpet. It's not a big deal. We can get most of it out. It'll be a vague memory 20 years from now. Because we think concretely. And if someone tells us this is how you solve this problem, this specific situation with this specific code, or with this specific price, or with this specific approach, this specific tool, we think, okay, I have that answer for that specific situation. We think concretely. And to transfer applicable knowledge, we must think abstractly. And the problem is, most of the time we don't. The problem is, most of the time, we forget about that. This is why we don't apply best practices. You could read all the best practices in the world. You can read all the tutorials in the world. Some of us read the tutorial, even try and implement it, and 6 months later have to go read the tutorial again. Right? Because what we've been doing is just trying to take specifics and apply it to specifics without any ability to abstract, generalize, summarize, and say, this is what I'm learning. And so because of that, we literally have to solve every single problem. We have to learn from every single mistake. Eleanor Roosevelt says, you will not live long enough to learn from all your mistakes. I think she's suggesting that one of them may kill you. It's a horrible way to learn. This is why I believe, and my only message and my only point to you today is that you should share everything you know with everyone you know all the time. There are some of you that haven't been using WordPress very long. And when you haven't been using WordPress very long, it's easy to get intimidated and think, I can't possibly teach someone something else. And this is because what happens when you're just getting started is you're looking ahead of you. You're looking at all the people that know more than you. You're looking at people on a journey that have been there 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year, 7 year, 8 year, 10 years longer than you. And so fundamentally you're like, they know more, so I'll just say nothing. But you haven't turned around and looked behind you. Because behind you are people that have been doing it for 2 minutes. And 5 minutes, and 8 minutes, and 12 minutes. There are people behind you that have been doing it for 1 day, and 2 days, and 4 days. And one of the things about open source is that it moves on the notion that you can look at, learn, use, adjust, and share, and must share, all those things you're playing with when it comes to open source code. And so my challenge and my encouragement to you, after you've spent a day of learning all sorts of amazing things, is if all you do is walk out and say, that was great, you will have to go to another one next weekend to learn the same stuff all over again, because it will not stick. Not for you, and not for the people around you, and most certainly not for the people behind you. If you summarize, if you write down and annotate, if you take notes and you generalize, if you abstract and understand everything you've learned today, it will not only be helpful to you, it will be helpful to the people behind you, around you, alongside you, and even you 6 months later. We were listening to someone today say, I did this search on Google, and the very problem I had, I found as an article on Google that solved it, right? And it was my own article, right? And even though someone else said it, I've had that exact same. I'm like, how do I pick between these two? And I go look, and I'm like, oh, there's a great clip. Oh, it's my article. I wrote that. I better read it again. This is why I'm a huge fan of blogging. Not so that you can develop a brand, not so that you can make revenue from your blog, not for any of those other reasons, but for the very specific reason that when it comes to the open source community and when it comes to what you're learning, you will learn better when you articulate it for someone else. You will learn. I'm not even talking about what they get out of it. You will learn better when you articulate it for someone else. You will learn it better when you have to figure out how to share what the lessons you've learned. And you'll learn the lesson. And in fact, as you learn the lessons and as you abstract those lessons, you will discover a variety of ways to apply those same lessons to other situations. If you don't, you won't. It's truly that simple. My name is Chris Lema. You can find me on Twitter at Chris Lema. I blog daily over at chrislema.com, and I am the CTO and chief strategist at a company called Crowd Favorite. Thank you very much.